Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Murder on the Orient Express from 1974. Now, why did I watch this? Well, because I was recently reminded that Death on the Nile is being remade. Now, let's draw a couple of connections here. There's a version of Murder on the Orient Express that was also made a few years ago, I believe in 2017. And both Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile are part of Agatha Christie's series of mystery/detective novels surrounding the main detective, Hercule Poirot. I'm gonna butcher that, but fuck it. I have a personal attachment to Poirot. I didn't watch a lot of TV or movies as a kid. I had my media consumption very restricted, but one of the things I was generally allowed to watch, even when perhaps I maybe shouldn't have, was PBS. And PBS had lots of different things, including a variety of both American and British mystery and sort of classical literature-based shows. Masterpiece Theater was one of the series that had an overarching... that's one of the ones I remember most distinctly. But Poirot was also there as one of the ones that... Well, it was sort of towards the end of my my childhood, but I digress. David Suchet played Poirot in the TV series, and he is Poirot to me. I can't deny that bias. He just is. Nobody will ever... I think it would be very difficult for anyone to ever beat David Suchet for characterizing that character. Poirot himself is a Belgian detective and a bit of a weirdo. I think that's fair to say. Poirot has always struck me as a much more interesting character as an individual than, say, somebody like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock has a history of his own and obviously written in a different era, but Sherlock is very kind of cut and dry, whereas Poirot is a bit of an odd duck. He does things his own way. He doesn't really explain himself a lot of the time. He's a little bit more Columbo than Sherlock Holmes. And I really enjoyed that. People are like deliberately shown to be kind of weirded out by him, but they appreciate his talents nonetheless. He's world renowned, so on and so forth. Anyway, to talk about Murder on the Orient Express, both versions, I've actually never seen any adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express. I haven't even seen the version that was done for the Poirot TV show. So I've actually never had the story spoiled for me. There's lots of cultural references to this particular story, which was a standalone novel or novella by Christie. And I'm sure I've seen some of those in retrospect, but I have no recollection, and somehow the plot was never spoiled for me, so I'm going to endeavor not to spoil it for anyone else either, if you haven't seen it. Now, Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express. Death on the Nile has just come out, and Murder on the Orient Express, the remake, came out a few years ago, as I mentioned. Both directed by my favorite and yours, Kenneth Branagh. Some of you, if you've watched this entire series, will remember my comments on Kenneth Branagh. Specifically in my video on Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, but I also believe I've brought him up on a number of other occasions as well because he pervades the movie industry and I don't know why. To recap, I think that Kenneth Branagh is a pretty bad director and a genuinely terrible actor. However, in taking some notes just before I went to record this, I was reminded of his one only good performance that I am actually in love with, which is his performance as Arliss Lovelace in Wild Wild West, which is an underrated film, and I will die on that hill because that film's still kind of great. And I will gladly argue my points about that if anybody wants to. That is his only good performance, the only performance of his that I really enjoy. Anyway, digression upon digression. I have no interest in watching the new Murder on the Orient Express or the new Death on the Nile. However, after watching this film, this version of the film, the 1974, I went back and watched a couple of clips from the new version, just out of like morbid curiosity. Like, is it real bad? Because he directs it. He also is the actor playing Poirot. And that gets to all of my points that I discussed before in my previous videos about Branagh being a big egotist piece of shit who just loves to toot his own horn and thinks he's God's gift to acting. He is extremely bad. The direction is extremely bad, and everything is incredibly overblown. And that's despite the fact that there are some actually great actors in that version of the film. I don't know how they screwed it up that bad, and I only watched 6-8 minutes of videos, of clips, but holy shit, I was like cackling at how awful it is. It's unbelievable. And the fact that they let him go and make another one is beyond my comprehension, because my recollection is it also wasn't very well received. I don't know why they're remaking these, and having admittedly not seen the previous movie version of Death on the Nile either, why would you not at least just go back and watch this? Anyway, I've buried the lead substantially. We're almost 8 minutes into this video. I've barely talked about this movie. But any opportunity I have to shit on Kenneth Branagh, I will. Anyway, Murder on the Orient Express from 1974. A bit dated, to be sure, but pretty great, actually. I was a little skeptical at the beginning. It starts out a little bit rough. The initial framework that they use to present the context for the rest of the film at the very beginning is kind of ham-fisted. It's done in like newspaper clipping style, and it's kind of take it or leave it. The first couple of scenes as well, when they are sort of boarding the train, there's some rough patches, and that is also the focus of the place where the most things that don't age very well are. There's a few elements in there that, while admittedly this is supposed to be set in the 1930s and it was made in the 1970s, some of the social and cultural depictions are make you a little make the the modern sensibilities cringe a little bit, but there's also some great stuff in there, and there's some great stuff throughout the film. The cast itself is just as star-studded, if not more star-studded, than the remake later on. A lot of, not too many names that are probably super recognizable to people who aren't already sort of, kind of, at least amateur film buffs. But obviously Sean Connery is a name that people will recognize. And Ingrid Bergman, I think people would recognize. and maybe Lauren Bacall. The most of the people, most of the actors are of note as well, but I think those are the big names that are most likely to be recognized. So the acting is the casting is good and the acting is very good. I think kind of across the board. There are some really extraordinary performances, not only just because of the subtleties that are delivered, but also to cut into sort of the cinematography discussion. There are some very long shots in this film, and with this ensemble cast that is not only a bunch of notable actors, but they're all many of them are in scenes together with 10, 12, 14 people on screen at the same time, to be able to have a long take. I hesitate to say oneer because we've talked about oneers before. That's, a minute plus and uncut and just really well done. It's very well done. The one sore spot for me, I think, is going to have to be Poirot himself, Albert Finney. Albert Finney is a name that some will recognize, and I don't think he does a terrible job. He does play a rather inconsistent Poirot, and that's what bothers me. Because like I said, Poirot is a bit of a weirdo, having some idiosyncrasies and some odd behaviors and saying some weird stuff and just being kind of weird is a plus. But there are a few moments where he strays a little bit too much. I hesitate to say cheesy, but it's getting there. I actually don't know where it may be deliberate that it's trying to be funny, or he's trying to be funny, and where it isn't. There are a few moments that I don't think are supposed to be funny, but are, because his behavior is just so odd. It's just like a moment of just I won't spoil anything. There's a few moments in there that are just so goofy you can't help but laugh. And for all the all the seriousness of the content in here, this is a pretty funny movie. There's a lot of dry humor in here that works really well. And it's a credit to the adaptation that it's able to strike a balance between the seriousness of this investigation versus the trying to deliver real believable characters in like 14 or so people on this train, each of them getting some time, and also being able to inject some humor and some balance into the tone. And I don't think that it swings too far one way or another. Not that I don't want to keep comparing this to the new version, but the remake, like the clips I saw in the remake, are like everything is so overwrought and overdone and like edgy, and everybody's playing it up too much from actors that I know can perform better than that. And so it's down to terrible directorship. And I mean, there's a time and place to lay it on thick for effect, but it's so overwrought. I can't bear it. Comparatively speaking, I think this film has a great amount of restraint. You never get the feeling that they're making too much light of it. You never get the feeling that anyone's not taking it appropriately seriously. The situations are very believable. The behaviors of these people and the characterization you get out of them is consistent with the reactions that they have. And some of what's interesting is because it is both in the writing and the and in the performance, a time capsule of a particular time in history and a particular class of people. While this is this is, a variety of different characters from different backgrounds. They are largely white and rich. And so as a time capsule of sort of, post World War One, sort of that interwar era and the international behavior, like it touches on the cultures of these various different places and the class expectations and the fact that these different languages are all being spoken, which, by the way, they don't shy away at all from the various characters talking in different languages. And that's used to really good effect. And so as a sort of time capsule of an era, and a certain class of people and certain cultural attitudes and prejudices towards and against one another and others, is all really interesting to me, and I think is a credit to the overall quality of the film, that even that kind of subtlety is able to be captured in a relatively... Actually, how long is this film? Hold on. I think it's longer than I think it is. It's over 2 hours. It does not feel over 2 hours. It keeps its pace really, really well. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel crammed in at all, and it keeps it at a great pace. So as a representation of the genre, while I think it may sort of be a different path to Poirot than, my Poirot, the Poirot from the TV series, I think it's really, really solid as a representation of Christie's writing, as Poirot as a character, with a few small exceptions, as an adaptation of the overall work and the style of Christie's writing, and as the truncation of, a novel or novella down to, the length of a feature film. I think it's really, really well refined. I have not read the original, so I can't speak to how close they tried to keep to some of the dialogue. It feels very authentic compared to some of her writings that I have read. So credit there for whatever that counts for. I don't know what the crossover is between the readers and watchers, or how much they really cared about that, or how much it really mattered. But I think it feels authentic in that respect as well. And I want to give special credit actually to the music, which is largely limited and largely in the background of the film, but in a couple of moments is really, really well composed. Fits what's on screen just perfectly, was very clearly composed for the film after it was shot, to fit certain scenes really nicely. I think the music is excellent, and mostly it stays out of the way, except in the moments where it needs to be up front to sort of lead you in the feeling of what the tone of the film is at those moments. Now, there are a few elements that I don't like so much. This is... I'm up and down on the cinematography. This is directed by Sidney Lumet, who has quite a lot of very notable films under his belt as a director. He among other things, he directed 12 Angry Men, which to this day I think is one of the most incredible films of all time. It's one of the closest to perfect films I think has ever existed. That is a particularly extraordinary film. He also directed, I want to say, Network and a couple of other films. He has sort of a long filmography, but he's a pretty good director. There are some sections of this film that while some of it I've already commented on is like extremely good. This film, I believe, was made relatively cheaply, and there are some moments when it shows. There's definitely some like hazy film, like some haze in some of the shots that feels weird. It feels very 70s in sort of its tone. The framing is sometimes a little bit awkward, and part of that may just be it's mostly on a train, and so I don't know what their filming setups were like in order to accomplish that without, whether it was a set or not. It's a cramped space to film in. So there's a few questionable things there. And in particular, there's some stylistic edits early in the film, both in sort of in keeping with my comment about the opening bit with the newspaper clippings, where there's some edits that are, it's the 70s. It's done in analog. They try and do some fun edits that would probably have been better just done as a fade in and out, and could have been cleaner. They're a little bit choppy, but it is editing in the 70s. It's very it's a period of experimentation and some questionable choices. So I'm not going to discount the film. I'm not going to knock anything off on that in particular, but it is notable because most of the problems I see with that are in the first third to maybe half of the film, whereas some of the most extraordinary film work is done in the latter half. There's actually some really nice shots using light and shadows and filming angles that are done pretty extraordinarily, but they're mostly towards the end of the film. And so with some like weird pacing stuff and some weird editing stuff at the beginning of the, like front loaded at the beginning of the film, it can feel a little off-putting in a way that isn't representative of the rest of the film. It's really the only reason I bring it up. Anyway, I thought this was pretty extraordinary. I still have no interest in watching anything Kenneth Branagh does. So we won't be doing that. But I may have to figure out, I don't even know when the Death on the Nile film is from or who directed it or anything. It's not the same. I don't think it's even the same production house. My understanding is that Agatha Christie did not like the adaptations that were made of her works. I mean, she's been dead for quite a long time now, I think. Yeah, she, even prior to this film, a lot of the adaptations she was not very happy with. Although apparently this is the one she likes the best, or liked. So anyway, I'm going to have to see about some of those possibly anyway, just to see what's up. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.